Welcome back. It's still the conversation on Morning Spring, and we return to conversation on the 2025 appropriation bill. What we need to know, what questions we should be asking, what Nigerians should focus on, what they should ask their representatives at the National Assembly to focus on. We have reconnected back to us, Mr. Samuel Lloyd Atiku, who would, continue with this conversation. Welcome back, Mr. Atiku.
Yeah, thank you. Sincere apologies
It's
for
fine.
for just what just happened now. Yes.
Okay, before that connection tripped, you were making a sense out of the fact that we are yet to get reports on quarter one, two, three, of the 2024 appropriation bill, 2024 budget of Renewed Hope, which was 28.7 trillion naira. I'd just like you to finish your thoughts on that.
So I think I was talking about the Fiscal Responsibility Act, which did state how government should behave, although they are not punishment for not. If you don't take those steps, of course, the Fiscal Responsibility Act do not punish you, but it did spell out what fiscal responsibility do means. And so it's sad, number one, because if you have very limited information on what happened in 2023, you don't know what happened in 2024 in terms of your fiscal outlay, in terms of what you spent and how, and then you could actually simulate and say, okay, this is what is happening. It's very difficult for you to plan for 2025. Uh, whether you're a business, whether you own a small business or you're a teacher or you're a student, you need to be able to think and iterate through this process. I think that's the essence of the budget. The budget is about having a clear, maybe it's our commonwealth, right? We are all contributing into a pot, and then we're spending out of that pot, number one, to improve our livelihood, to make sure that things are going on appropriately. But if we really do not know what we're spending on, it's difficult. But that's the first big issue. And of course, those are transparency issues. The second big issue also is to begin to question. You remember, there are a series of reforms that people are going through that whether we like it or not, that affected every household in the country.
Yeah.
Subsidy have been taken out, a whole lot of things have been taken out. And so the budget, giving us information on what is in the budget, how you spent it, what the revenue outlook look like, I think it helps you understand whether the direction of travel, if you think about it, whether government's intention for introducing some of those reforms are actually yielding results. So very, very limited information to ascertain that. So when governments do our reforms are yielding positive results, how do we know that? It's difficult. That's just word of the mouth. We need evidence to actually compare those words with evidence, and those evidence seems to be missing. So those are the big issues that we just clearly raised. And finally, to say that if you look at international conventions,
Yeah.
for instance, if you look at the Global Initiative for Fiscal Transparency, you look at the IMF framework for transparency, you look at the World Bank framework for transparency, you leave that. I talked about the Nigerian independent one, which is the Fiscal Responsibility Act. If you look at the African Union Convention around public finance, all those things talks about how government should behave. And one of the key things there is publishing your in-year report, your budget implementation report. Unfortunately, we've not seen that for the last 5 quarters. And that becomes very sad and very, very painful if you look at it in that perspective.
Okay, let's look at the proposed budget now. 47.9 trillion naira for the year 2025. Yes, we do not have all of the details as it is now, but of course we have some parameters already out. 47.9 trillion naira compared to the 28.7 trillion naira in 2024. What do you think? When you first got that figure, what was the first thing that came to your mind?
I think a couple of things. I can talk about 5 things that comes to mind immediately. The first thing is, one, compare with, first remove the effect of, I'll call it the effect of the devaluation of the currency, and see what that money can buy. That was the first thing I would typically do. And so when you look at the 47.9 trillion naira budget, it looks so big. But when you actually remove the effect of inflation devaluation, you will notice that it's actually the lowest that we've had since 2018. And that shows how far we've fallen apart as a country, how the purchasing power of people had been eroded, and also how the purchasing power of government had eroded. Essentially, in 2018, when we're doing about how much is our budget in 2018, the value of that budget is still way higher than what we have today. And that tells us something that it's not just about the money, it's about how we preserve our money. And that we've talked so much about that we need to ensure that monetary policies, fiscal policies, to ensure that the wealth of the people, the money in the pocket of people, are kept in their immediate state. If you have an inflationary environment, you get this. Essentially, what it means is that what 100 naira we buy in 2018, you cannot buy it again. So if you are constructing a road maybe for 10 billion naira before, you may need close, you will need it close to maybe 80 to 90 or even 100 billion to do the same road. And we could see it is simple. Look at the bag of rice before, how much it costs, and look at it today. So that's how project also works. So it's not about how big the money is, but in terms of what the money can actually do. And unfortunately, what the money was doing in 2018, today, even despite the fact that we have 47.9 trillion naira, we can't actually do it. That's the first one. The second thing is about the economic growth and the projection. If you look closely at the medium-term expenditure framework that's been published, of course, that's what was approved, and then that shows the framework itself. You will notice that, yes, the government was projecting a growth rate of 4.6%, and they are also benchmarking oil price at $75 per barrel. And then we're looking at oil production eating 2 million barrels, 2.06 million barrels per day. Now, those projections, whether we like it or not, again, are overly optimistic. Based on, if you look at the economic reality we find ourselves today, the economy is not just going to jump on Okada and start riding at 4.6. A lot of things need to go on. And if you look closely at inventories of manufacturers, it is up. You remember a few days ago, there were a lot of manufacturers complaining that things they are producing, they can't sell it. Because yes, rightfully so, people don't have money to buy some of these things.
Yeah.
And so what has happened in terms of your economic policy to drive that up, that is low. We need to look at that. Then the oil price benchmark of $75. When you look at it on the flip side of saying, okay, maybe there will be a geopolitical crisis in the world and that could push oil price up. Yeah, maybe you achieve that, but when you look at the production numbers, I don't think we've invested enough in our upstream sector to begin to push oil to 2.06 million barrels per day. Even when we had most multinationals, I mean the OICs here,
You feel it's not
putting in money.
achievable? It's too optimistic.
Yeah, that's the second thing. The third one is the debt. I mean, we can come back there. The debt ceiling, we are raising it, and that's scary. So that I don't talk too much about them, we can always circle back. We look at oil revenue itself, and then we compare with our exchange rate assumptions. Remember, a big chunk of that oil revenue will be going to domestic production. We know, I don't want to mention name of companies and all those things. Those are contextual issues. So how do we manage both? And what is happening there? We cannot get clarity. Finally, they talked about a lot of social welfare spending that they put in there. The question is that how much of that will drive job creation? How much of that will actually go into reducing poverty? How much of that will actually improve the social welfare of people? There are big question marks that we need to answer. And those are the key 5 things I look at when I look at the budget in the initial phase.
All right. Now, assuming an inflation rate, and you had already mentioned the parameters. Now, let's talk about the inflation rate, which that particular bill puts at 15.8%. And we know the inflation rate right now is above 30%. In fact, it's 33.88% as of October 2024. That's you know, there are people who believe, and also institutions that believe that this is unrealistic because it's a drop by 51%. Are we expecting, is the federal government expecting inflation to crash by 51%, in the year 2025?
Now, I mean, there are question mark around inflation, but for clarity, when we talk about inflation rate, we are only comparing the price of 2024 against 2025. So inflation rate is not looking at the base effect of 2023. So it's only comparing what happened in 2024 against what happened in 2025. So a lot of variables will need to change significantly in 2025 for price to actually collapse. So if the bag of rice today is 80,000, what the government is essentially saying is that it's most likely going to grow by 15% by this time next year. They are not saying that price of things will reduce or something. So it's going to grow by maybe 10 naira, so it becomes 90,000. So that's what they're saying. Now the question is that attainable? To get to that level, a lot of things will happen. First, we need to strengthen our monetary policy institution. If you look closely at the central bank's website today, and you go and examine how much money the monetary base, whether it's expanding or shrinking, that's how you know whether. I mean, economists, there are different reasons why inflation will go up. But one of the major reasons, I mean, we all know about that, is the monetary effect itself. The central bank continues to expand our monetary base. And we saw this budget again this year. It's a lot of money when you look at it in naira terms, meaning that, yeah, we may have those challenges. I mean, so I'm not convinced, just like you have said, that we will be able to rein in on inflation this year. It's going to be a tough order, and to get inflation down to 15% is not. I know Obasanjo, during Obasanjo's era, he was able to achieve that within a space of 3 years. But if government is estimating that within 18 months they will push inflation down to 15%, I don't know how they will do that. But for me, looking at the numbers I see in front of me, I would say that's an overly optimistic projection.
All right, thank you. Let's look at some variables, some benchmark, as compared in these proposed 2025 budget document and 2024 as well, which is the running year. At the time, 2024 budget was known as the budget of the renewed hope, because that was the real budget, apart from the supplementary of 2023 when it came in. The budget that runs January to December, of which you could say this is his own budget, talking about President Bola Tinubu. Now, in 2024, the dollar benchmark was put at 800 naira, to a dollar. Actually, it was 750. It was National Assembly, I think, that raised it to 800 naira per dollar. And from that time, from January 2024 to this time, we all know what happens, what has been happening with the rate of the naira to dollar, but it was officially pegged at 800 naira per dollar. Now, in 2025, the same benchmark has been put at 1,400 naira per dollar, from 800 to 1,400 naira per dollar. That's a difference of 600 naira. Now, how realistic was the 800 naira, and what was the impact of the dollar benchmark of 800 naira to a dollar in 2024? Now, the proposal has been put at 1,400 naira. Now, the benchmark for crude oil per barrel, oil price benchmark, which is the thing, has been put at $75 per barrel for 2024. I mean, for 2025, $75 per barrel, and an oil production target of 2.06 million barrels per day. So looking at that, how realistic are we doing? I'm not sure we are doing 2 million at the moment. Now we have put it as $2.06 million. 2.06 million barrels per day. And with the oil theft going on unabated, especially through rivers at on the IC rather, at the south region. But for 2024, I think it was put at $77 per barrel. I stand to be corrected now. Now, these are the issues: 77 for 2024, $75 per barrel in 2025 proposal, and put at 2.06 million barrels per day. We're not even too close to that at the moment. And then 800 naira per dollar in 2024, 1,400 naira per dollar in 2025 proposal. How do you see all this playing out? Carrying it from 2024, those benchmark into 2025. Atiku.
Yeah, it's dangerous because again, you're planning to fail if your variables as best as possible. That's what we call that's how you build the credibility of a budget. When we talk about budget credibility itself, your budget, your projections should ideally, that's the global standard,
Right.
should be plus or minus 5%. That's the only acceptable benchmark. Once it jumps outside of that, they typically look at your budget and say, oh, your budget is actually not credible. That's how we think of budget and global tennis, whether anywhere you go in the world. I mean, in businesses, if you are actually employed as a management accountant and then you project the revenue of an organization, and at the end of the day you are doing less than 50%, you most likely not have a job after that episode. So to be clear again, the exchange rate projections for last year, I think it was clear to everybody that looked closely at it that it was overly optimistic. When you're saying 800, nobody, I think it was just based on the belief that the naira will somehow find thrust and then it will push back down. But on the flip side of things, also, we need to remember that Nigeria also makes substantial amount of its revenue. If you look closely at the oil revenue, it comes in dollar terms. If you look at VAT, even VAT, most of the value added tax components, right? You have two. You have the import component and then you have the domestic, I will call it the foreign exchange component, and then you have the domestic component. The foreign exchange component of VAT also relies on dollars. So if government is saying, ah, we are going to make 800, now they are making per dollar, now they are making almost 1,600, 1,400. I think it gives them more revenue on the long time, right? We call it gains. But in terms of planning, it tells people that, yeah, there are credibility issues there. Why are you doing this? What is happening? Meaning that maybe your macroeconomic variable had fallen apart. And that's not good for planning. Overall, I think if you look closely at the revenue based on what was submitted to MTEF, the medium-term expenditure framework and the fiscal term paper, if you go on the website of the budget office there, I think they give us a clue as to how much revenue they've made. They said they've made close to what they projected, meaning that they're doing about 23 trillion. We don't know the breakdown. Of course, they did some breakdown. We can't really ascertain because of accounting issues. We need to see the numbers from the budget office. But going into this year, my fear is that if we continue this in this trajectory of building, I will call it, we are planning to build, you're planning to build a skyscraper and then you're putting it on the foundation of a boys' quarter. Of course, it's going to collapse on its head. People, foreign investors will look at you and see you as unserious. Remember, a lot of construction companies that are looking to enter into Nigeria, maybe to construct certain things, they will have to look at some indices. They want to look at what is government trying to spend on construction activity, and then you want to calibrate it in dollars, right? And then based on that, you can plan whether to buy more equipment, to bring in more equipment to actually support in case you win some contracts. Now, you can't bring in those equipment, you can't do all those things because you really don't know what government is doing, and that's not good for planning. In the same vein, also, if you look closely at the road close to you, if government is saying, I'm going to construct a road very close to you there, and you're a small business, maybe you're a baker, and then you're already thinking, oh, if government is going to build a road in this place, of course, the people that are the construction worker there will most likely like to eat bread and are going. Why not let me just expand my business, bring in more oven and all those things? That's how you think as a businessman. That's how it's done all over the world. And based on that, you project and then you begin to look for funding to expand your business. But if you are not sure whether the road will even come to fruition, right? It means that you fold your hands and then you keep waiting and then you keep waiting. And if the road gets in there, you can't quickly move to address that issue, and then we create these gluts and all those issues. So those are the challenge we have with how the fiscal regime in Nigeria is. And I'm sorry to say that in 2025, I think we continue on this trajectory again. And it's not healthy for the economy. I think the government should do better in terms of how they present their plans, the kind of information they are providing around those plans, and then more importantly, making sure that you are as credible as possible. It's better for you to tell it's better to tell your family, oh, my salary is 40,000 naira, let's plan with 40,000 naira, than to go and tell people that, oh, this year I'm planning to make 3 million a month, whereas you are just barely earning 30,000. And then everybody goes into this this happy mood. They say,
Yeah,
oh,
frenzy.
my dad is going to earn 3 million per month this year, and then you go jumping around. All of a sudden, you come back and then you say, oh, it's only 30,000. Then what happens next month? Then people's trust, you begin to lose trust in that government.
All right.
And then that's what degenerates into many things.
Yeah, away from the figures, at least for now, let's talk about the way of doing things properly. Due diligence. Many persons have been saying. In fact, it took the House of Reps to call out the president to say it's appearing late. You should have presented this budget. In fact, the thing is, in as much we are running a January to December, that's the proposal, a kind of budget, for the fiscal year, we should be having these, around October. You should be doing the presentation. But at that time, the president was outside of the country for a private visit, for medical, whatever, all kind of junketing around. And the House of Reps officially had to say, we are waiting. This thing should be done. And, many persons have been fearing, economists, social analysts have been saying, what kind of a job can we do? The president made the presentation, less than a week ago. And what kind of due diligence can we do if we actually want to run in January to December, just few weeks, or just over a month to the end of the year? The National Assembly will soon go on recess. We know sometimes they do things beyond the plenary, but then what kind of a job can they do? This thing was just presented in November, and the Yuletide is almost upon us. Do you fear, because that's the fear of many, that we might have a repeat of the yay and nay kind of budget passing, in which, MDAs and their handlers will just come and you won't see the proper work of scrutiny? Even when they have said they have scrutinized, you still see some insertions, some funny insertions, like when you see like an MDA of the government, like oceanography agency, constructing roads, distributing something in a village that doesn't have anything to do with them. Do you fear? And, let me add the second angle to it. The political influence that the executive has on this National Assembly, because that's the notion in so many fronts to say the president, the executive has an overbearing influence on this National Assembly. Now that the proposal has been made in November, what kind of job can they do? Can they get to any part where they will raise their hands and say, this and this and this, we are not comfortable with it, we will not have it? So the time of presentation on one hand, the political overbearing influence of the executive on the National Assembly on the other hand.
Yeah, I think you nailed it right. You are absolutely correct. I think it's and that's why, I mean, the National Assembly also, whether we like it or not, they cannot absolve themselves of the blame. I recall in 2022, 2023, when Nigeria actually did improve on the Fiscal Transparency Index. The reason why they improved was because they published, number one, the budget was presented very early, and then it allowed the National Assembly to go through the process and then pass the budget by January. And because the budget was passed in January, I think most of the in-year report was also released on time. And based on that, Nigeria actually leaped. In fact, we were actually the leading country in terms of how we jumped in the world in terms of fiscal transparency. Now and the Minister of Finances at that time, Honorable Madam Zainab, did mention that one of the key things to actually ensure this continue was to pass the organic budget calendar, to compel the president to present the budget as at this time, and that helps also the National Assembly to actually pass the budget at this time. Now, for clarity, in the US, for instance, the budget for next year, 2025, was submitted very early in 2024. So the whole work of the National Assembly, the Congress in the US, is to deliberate about that budget throughout the year, so that you ensure that every little corner are touched. The whole work around the oversight and all those things goes into it. And even at that, there's no guarantee that the budget will be passed by December, to tell you the kind of work that goes into this. I'm not saying, yes, you should adopt that kind of system. But if you're presenting the budget, I don't know, if you're presenting the budget maybe tomorrow, gives you very limited time. I remember the budget is not just the document of the president. It's the public document itself that people, everybody should actually talk about. You need to engage the government about. If your community is not covered in the budget, you raise your queries with your National Assembly, your representative. Now you're giving people very limited time to talk about. That's one. The second thing I'll talk about is this. Even if you go into the budget, the budget is divided into two broad ways. The way we look at the budget, we divide it into two broad. There's one, if you look at, for instance, if you look at the last year's budget, 24 trillion. That 24 trillion is not everything that is under the control of the minister. People think about the budget and they think about a ministry. There are two types. You have the service-wide votes, and then we call it capital supplementation budget. And then you have the ones that are directly controlled by the MDAs itself. The budget that is controlled by the MDA is less than 50% of the budget. So the real big bulk of the budget, which is sad to say, it's sad to say, it's actually even riddled in a lot of secrecy. For instance, I can give you a good example. If you look at the crisis that had happened in Nigeria, if you look at the Dasuki issue, the money he was able to get and steal, I don't know, so that I don't preempt people, that he was accused of stealing, the truth is that it was taken from the service-wide votes. If you look at the issues with the grass cutter issue, it was taken from the service-wide vote. So most of the corruption case that you see comes from the service-wide vote. And if you look at the service-wide vote, there's no breakdown. There's no breakdown in the service-wide. So you can't really articulate to say this is what happened. And that's why the National Assembly needs ample time to discern what is happening within that service-wide and capital supplementation account itself. That's the second big issue. That's why you need more time to actually interrogate this budget. Then the third issue is also to ensure that there's fair distribution. When people accuse people, we have NABRO at the National Assembly, that's the National Assembly Budget and Research Office. They typically will look at the budget and break it down by geopolitical zone so that they could actually say, okay, the whole concept of equity, diversity in how we spend funds, and inclusiveness is actually enshrined in the budget itself. Unfortunately, for you to look at the budget, remember in the budget you have over 20,000 projects. How do you ascertain where this project is coming on? And you need time to do all those things. You can't do it in 3 weeks and pass the budget. So all these things put together, again, raise that big question. Why are we bringing out budget? It's sad. My own take is this: the National Assembly need to pass the organic budget calendar. We need to say, okay, the president needs to present the budget, whether it's October, and we will pass it by December. If we know we have 3 months, let's plan based on that 3 months. And we know definitely that 3 months we will call it the budget months. And then we can go and interrogate this budget and ensure that the document that come out of that process is something that will power the country. Me personally, I don't believe that the kind of budgeting we are doing in Nigeria today is actually giving us positive outcome as an impact person. I think we need to shift towards program-based budgeting. And of course, that's a big discussion for another day.
Yeah.
But yes, we need ample time for planning. Unfortunately, I don't think we're having that this time around again.
All right, unfortunately, we are out of time this morning, but definitely we'll bring you on board to discuss to the key parameters and also the details of the budget in the different ministries when we have them. Thank you so much, Samuel Lloyd Atiku, Research and Impact Evaluation Associate at the University of Bristol, United Kingdom, for your time, your analysis and submissions this morning.
Thank you once again for having me on the program, and happy anniversary to Western Spring. It's happy. I know what you do.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. All right, enjoy the rest of your day. All right, these are the kind of conversations we have, and we speak to facts, we speak to issues, and we are not, we do not hold back when it comes to speaking to facts and issues. Thank you so much for being a part of our world. We'll make a return next week, Monday, for another interesting time on Morning Spring. My name is Evelyn Ohiolei. And of course, ensure to stick around for Spring Trends coming right after this broadcast.
Yes, and as you already know, it's our second anniversary. Actually, it's the anniversary week. You might, follow us on all our social media platforms, please. Instagram, Facebook, and X. And also on our YouTube channel at Western Spring TV. Western Spring TV. Like, share, comment, drop, your impression of us, especially in the last 2 years, for us to do better. Thank you very much for staying with us for the last 2 years, and thank you for so many years to come. Femi Ojo is my name. Big shout out to the production team. See you tomorrow, God willing. on Monday rather. Bye.